I got a business proposition for you. Hello, today I am going to tell you why you should buy stock in A Teia. This is not financial advice. I have a series of questions for you, Netrunner player. Do you dread losing corp games in what's looking like a runner meta? Do you want to play honest Netrunner, as people like to call it, but hate paying for things? You just want to get to 7 points, but you keep spending all your money on ice? Do you miss the glory days of Jinteki RP? Do you wake up in the middle of the night screaming deep dive sable in a cold sweat, leading to your partner calling the therapist again in the morning, only to be met with, "I'm sorry, but we are just not qualified to treat Netrunner-related trauma. They just need to learn a good deck"? I have a deck for you. Introducing Build Me Up Buttercup. It's an A Teia deck. I'm just going to lead with the deck list, because I think it's helpful to have the context of the whole list before we take it apart. This is a relatively straightforward deck in a lot of ways, but A Teia adds a lot of wrinkles, so we're going to go over that, don't worry. I'll be going over each category of card, bit by bit. The key principle here is that we're an incredibly install-heavy deck that maximizes the A Teia value. Again, we're at a card pool now where money is a lot thinner, so A Teia's ability is so much better than people remember. After cards, we're going to be talking about potential swaps, some of which I've tested to varied success. I actually don't think this version of the deck is necessarily the optimal version of itself. It's what's worked really well for me in locals and in JNet, but I am very curious to see where other people can take this. What I would recommend, though, is if you haven't played much for A Teia, if this is outside of your norm, give this like 3 games just to get a sense for what it's trying to do, and then salt to taste from there. By all means, change whatever you want. Go wild, but I think that it's a really interesting archetype that kind of doesn't quite resemble a lot of other ice-heavy, pseudo-honest decks. Also, this has some cards I hate in it. I warned you that my ratings in those old videos weren't serious. So what's the win con? We are a never-advanced deck capable of scoring agendas in increasingly taxing remotes that you didn't pay for in a set where runners are notably cash poor. The ideal scoring pattern is 2-2-3. But 4-2s is totally fine. Scoring the 3-pointer early is not ideal, but honestly not much harder than getting a lot of the 2s, for reasons that'll become clear in a minute. You're going to want to draw aggressively. Your agendas are going to be conveyor belted straight from R&D into remotes almost all the time. You're going to be using the upgrades to install ice in the other remote that you want to make bigger, and then using the Sysop hop, we're going to scoot them around. We're also going to be installing back and forth a lot because we're going to make heavy use of both servers. They're both very important. They gave us 2. By God, we're going to use both of them. All of this is facilitated by the ability to generate a whole lot of draw-in money, which supplements the install discounts really, really well. We never stop moving. That is why this deck is strong. It constantly demands that the runner keep up with it, and that is really, really, really hard to do in this card pool. Early game, you're functionally like an HB ETF for installs. By mid to late, your ID can generate a click and 3 to 4 credits of value while you pay nothing. In some cases, you can get paid to do it. It is amazing. It's free real estate. You should absolutely be trying this. So let's talk agendas. There's a notable exclusion, but we'll get there. 3-2s are obviously the easiest to never advance because they just get scored next turn. You will very rarely over-advance a sericulture unless the runner just cannot do anything to you. But if you do, it is a nice little money saver against a broke runner or a way to load Charlotte. All of that is really handy. Also, if it happens to be on a Costa, it's one of those things where it's like, you might as well, unless you really need that last click to say, recover from a Hermes, or something to that effect. There's reasons why you might alter your scoring pattern, and that's certainly one of them. Longevity is a decent trick to bury your agendas when you're weak, and find them when you're strong, but if you're in a spot to score it and fully utilize it, you're probably doing fine. It tends to be a little bit win more. That said, it is the best 3-2 we have access to, so we're playing that one of. Feel free to swap in Yagi-Uda. I bet a lot of people probably look at sericulture and said, why this? The answer is I've tested both. I find that the additional procs on the over-advance for Yagi weren't really necessary, but honestly, go with what you're feeling. Both of them are fine. The most important thing is the stat line. The text is kind of secondary. It's fine. I've leaned sericulture. You can go Yagi-Uda. You will lose no sleep over it. They're both fine. More agendas. Proprio Negation is the sequel to Nisei Mark II and is arguably stronger. I think that sending people into archives is better than just straight up saying no. There is no more demoralizing play for a runner, especially in this particularly broke card pool, than dragging themselves through their awful never advance remote finally just to eat a counter. Now, they know that you have this, so it's not an unknown factor, and if they money up super, super hard, like you're playing against a Hosh or whatever, with a loaded fermenter, they can get you, but you have answers to some of that stuff. We'll get there. Vuln Audit says 4 in the advanced field and 3 in the point field. You don't need me to explain this. This is a very good card. We do not need all of our 15 influence to make a functional deck, and so we play 2 of them. Note that our density is pretty low. We've only got 9 agendas, and we move them immediately into remotes, meaning that centrals can be defended a little bit lighter than usual, unless you are playing against Deep Dive or Crew Anarch. We have answers for that too. They're not perfect, but they're pretty dang good. Asset time. Both of our remotes need to be agenda ready. It is important to understand that you have 2 very solid servers that you're constantly able to build with a surprising amount of flexibility, and it's important to keep the runner guessing and swapping between the 2, being forced to do math on new pieces of ice over and over. That means that the assets we have cannot sit for long. They need to be readily trashable or self-trashable. We're on La Costa, to the surprise of nobody, and Charlotte on La Costa is one of the best value generators on the card pool. However, for the love of God, do not just sit there with a Charlotte in the remote all game. You will lose. It is so easy to fall for the, wow, I just get money for free psyop over and over and over and over. It's a very, like, glacier-pilled kind of idea there, and you can't let yourself fall for that. You need to know when to cut Charlotte. You've got several. You can get her again if you have to. A couple turns of Charlotte should be more than enough. You'll be just fine. If you empty a Regolith, you're probably set for the rest of the game. Regolith has rapidly reached a point where it's an almost Rashida level of power. It's way more of a time commitment, so it's not nearly as busto. But there's definitely a point where Regolith is just like, alright, this is by far the most amount of money you can reasonably get on a single card. And Rego does that for you. It does it on a thing that requires no real commitment outside of time once it's rezzed. And by the time you've rezzed it and used it, the runner is a lot more disincentivized to touch it. It's just great. You need to play this if you can. Spin Doctor, obviously, mandatory, very functional. Do not be afraid to res it and pop it in the same window, basically. We're very fast, and we can make better use of reusing our cards quicker and shuffling stuff back into R&D than most cards that do what we do. That said, obviously, Spin Doctor is a very good bait to run people through a server they didn't want to go to, and it saves your agenda. So, use the defensive function as well, but we can play a little more aggressively with it too, so that's pretty nice. Moonpool does everything. It's defensive, it speeds up our game plan, it's remote bait while we're setting up to use it. It's an amazing card you should absolutely be making use of. I love this thing. The more I play with it, the more play lines I see with it. It's gotten to the point where I'm pretty sure it should be a must-trash for runners because it's just too damn good to have around. I love this thing. We do only run 2 because 3 of them is too many, but honestly, if you went to 3, I would not call you unreasonable for doing so. Let's talk about La Costa. La Costa gets its own thing. It's a click and a credit, and it accelerates our game plan without telegraphing what's in the remote. Sick. That's everything we needed to do. Savvy runners will trash these on site every single time, but 4 is ridiculously expensive in this economy. It is really, really hard. La Costa is so good for us because every time the runner engages with it, they are losing a sure gamble, and every time we engage with it, we're gaining unreasonable amounts of tempo. More bonus clicks all the time. Fantastic. You can advance non-agendas with La Costa. We don't really care. This is a way more linear use case for the thing. You can do a lot more exciting stuff with it than we've basically allowed ourselves to do. Put a pin in this for when we talk about card swaps. There are use cases that you can do with this. We're just not really fussing with that right this minute. Oh god, is that Mitra Aman's music? So, I am on record saying that I think Mitra's a messed up card, and A Teia wrings more value out of Mitra than any other ID. A Mitra res gets you 3 credits, a swap into the best piece of ice you have available, including in your trash, and an A Teia install on the runner's turn. Like I said, we have a couple of ways to do this, and Mitra is probably the best one. If the runner's fully breakered up, no worries. Swap into an anemone or a fly swatter, whatever's worse for them. Something that has a nasty res effect. There's a couple of those in sort of our swap and experiment section that we're going to talk about too. It's really, really, really good. Swapping into these, especially on R&D runs against Deep Dive or a virus-heavy Anarch deck, is brutal. It's backbreaking stuff. Extremely strong play. Best case scenario, they run last click and you could chuck an agenda into the other remote, which is hilarious. If they end up unable to continue running, you get to just do your important installs later. It's great. And you'll note that the absolute worst case scenario for this is that this subsidizes your ice, and you get an ID proc anyway, probably. It's just always good. You should be having Mitra available all the time. This is awesome. Also, the fact that Mitra's unique is not a problem because you res it and pop it every time. So you can just get them out wherever you need them and then roll. 2 Sysops this time. The Sysop scoot is amazing for us. It lets us install into one remote and throw ice into the other and then slide them over. Or slide them onto a central, depending on what needs resing or what needs defense. Adrian is no caprice, but he doesn't need to be, and he costs you nothing to res, which is great. Also, forcing people to read the text on Adrian is a cruel act, and you should do it to people. I think that they probably deserve it. Vovo goes wherever you have unresed ice. Remotes, centrals, doesn't matter. Wherever you think you are going to need to res things, you Vovo. That root bonus doesn't really matter. We don't really care about that. It could get you a Costa later on if you need to reinstall one, but it's that's kind of the cap, honestly. Technically, Vovo is a flex slot, but it's one that I would be very iffy about changing, with the exception of one card that we'll get to later. I think that Vovo is an all-star. I think this dude is just a ludicrous amount of value for a deck as ice-heavy, res-heavy as us. And one amazing thing with Vovo that you can do that I don't specifically make note of here is that the server in which you put Vovo, or slide Vovo, is automatically stared at by the runner and like, oh, I'm going to have to run that, aren't I? And sometimes the answer is no. You can bait runs with this extremely well. And it's just so much value anytime they run the Vovo server. It's great. If they start to get to the point where they won't run the Vovo server, use that. Slide him to where you want to actually keep things. Like, play the mind game. Vovo is a great card for this. You should really consider it. Cha-cha real smooth. Operation. Singular. This is the only one. I have gradually been cutting more and more and more operations from this list until eventually the only one that survived was peer review. Because it does everything A Teia wants in an operation. It's even more install shenanigans, it gets you money, it plays mind games, it's great, it's fantastic. That reveal is really good for baiting runs through your god-awful remotes. You're going to keep putting things in these remotes. The runner is going to see things they have to trash or have to kill or have to touch. And peer review is like, I don't know where I put it. Could be either. I don't know. A Teia install, man. Where'd it go? We don't want more operations than this because you can't install them simple as. There are, of course, operations, one in particular that we'll get to later, that are really good, but every operation that sits in the hand is a card that we could have installed, and you're going to feel that if your hand starts to clutter. Try to either have a draw option to recover after dumping 3 cards with this, or just set up a scoring window and score next turn, and then you'll have an extra card to play with after the fact. It's a little tough to recover from a peer review sometimes because it does an amazing job of emptying your hand, but it means that next turn is a little tough for installs, so just keep that in mind. Alright, we got a lot of ice to go through. Barriers are a special call out here because they're better than they've been in ages in a no cleaver zone, and therefore we run 50% barriers. There's a lot of barriers in this deck because they're very taxing. Hi, Bran. It's Bran. You know it, you love it. Bran is the best barrier in the game. You will play Bran. Botu is a lot better than people think it is. It's kind of a bootleg brand, but that's a really high bar. The only real weakness is having the same sticker price as Bran while starting weaker and having to toss a card to end the run in a deck where we're not keen on losing our cards because we want to install them. That said, it's not clickable, and that does count for something. So we absolutely do run Botus. It's more just to strengthen our very large barrier count without having to spend even more influence on more copies of Bran. But understand that these are both good and you're very happy to play them. Also, one time I flatlined somebody back-to-back Botus, and that was fantastic. Totsugeki. Goodness, so much ice to talk about. If you're playing Jinteki, it's basically never a question of whether you play Tatubola, it's a question of how many, and the answer here is 3, because it gets you an extra ID install in the remotes every time you pop it. This is the second best way to cheat out runner turn installs behind Mitra. It's Tatubola. You don't need me to explain why Tatubola's good. Speaking of good, Palisade. Yeah, we run this. It's a 3/4 that chills in the remote. It's kind of hefty. It's annoying for a lot of fractors to get through now. It's good. Samaksamoon. I don't love this card personally, but it's a tech card we can afford to play without weakening our game plan, so we play it. This is kind of in like that virus zone where it's like, yeah, it's in faction. It's not really a problem to play it. And in the case of Samaxamoon, it's a little easier to swallow. And also, there's a decent amount of AI floating around right now, so Samak handles that pretty well. NPOT is an all-star for its cost and subs. Plus, it's really nasty to bank our decks if it's on the outside, and other ways of cheating through subs, whatever that might be, that care about the quantity of subs more so than what they actually do. NPOT's also just, like, not viable to do the pay effect for reliably, because goodness gracious, 3 is a lot when you have to do it multiple times. You could cut this, and it would be fine. What you replace it with specifically, a little bit more dubious. But if you wanted to save influence, there's certainly ways to do that. Fly Swatter is a flimsy tech card that I don't particularly like. But the only other non-influence ETR code gates are Half-Run, sort of, put a pin in that, and White Space, which is barely usable. Popping virus counters with a Mitra swap is the actual best use case for this card. Normally, if you put a Fly Swatter somewhere, you're just praying that they run it when they're vulnerable. Mitra guarantees that Fly Swatter comes out when you need it, and that is a lot more powerful. I have shut down so many botchless runs with this thing. I have cleaned out so many gigantic fermenters with this thing. It is so much better with Mitra, it's unreal, but I would only play it in a Mitra Aman deck. And or maybe as a one of in certain matchups, but probably not. But I do like it here. Anemone is hilarious with Mitra, it kind of goes without saying, but it's also a legitimately excellent answer to deep dive players. They can't really get away from this. Even if they bypass it, you are still thwacking them for 2 in the hand, and that may very well ping a deep dive. It would be reasonable to slot a third. I think that depending on your read on the meta, you may very well want to. It's just a good piece of ice. We run at least 2, for sure. Bathonimus goes on archives and is respectably large for what it is. You don't actually need this card. I like it. I like chucking people into this with a proprio counter. This is entirely a flex slot, though. Don't misunderstand. I think it's important for every Jinteki deck to have at least one big-ass sentry, but our selections for that are really, really slim right now. Empiricist is one. I have not been impressed with it. You can and maybe should cut this. That said, I have absolutely thwacked people with this, and it's really, really good on a central that they intend to run a lot. Typically R&D. And the reason I say that is because your remotes they're going to be switching between, but R&D there's only really one way in unless they have another effect to get through. They got an arrow Beatrice or something. Empiricist is really nice to have on a central like that because no killer breaks this clean. However, it's so expensive, its subs or whatever, it's not that great. We can't fully leverage the tag or what have you. So I'm very back and forth on this one. I would understand if you cut it. So let's talk weaknesses, because I'm not going to pretend the deck is perfect. Azamat and Chesva to a lesser extent, any way that they can reliably trash your stuff from HQ or to R&D less so, but you really don't want to lose your cards in HQ. Half your deck has trash costs, that can make you vulnerable. HQ pressure in general is not great for us. Not because there's any agendas there, it's actually pretty hard for them to score points out of HQ, but because you really would rather not ice it as a result, and would like to not have to slam all of your upgrades out in one go to avoid them getting trashed. This is a problem that you're going to have to solve. You will need to put at least one piece of ice on HQ in almost every matchup. I think Shapers are a little dubious on that front, but Anarchs you're going to have to, and Criminals especially you're going to have to. We are fairly capable of resisting and surviving an econ headlock, but losing key upgrades and early points can really be tough to recover from because we're trying to move with a fair amount of urgency, and if we don't have agendas to score, we're not making progress, and that can be bad. Hoshiko in particular, or like Seb with siphons or whatever, can be rough on this front, so ice up appropriately, make adjustments, change your playstyle. You would reasonably guess that an ice destruction deck would be a bad matchup, but no, not really. Very little of our ice outside of our big barriers and Empiricist are like a big loss if they hit it. We have a ton of ice. No individual piece of ice is load-bearing. There's a lot of end the run in there. We will find a way. It is consistently solid. In my test games, of which I've played somewhere in the 20s, I have not found crew to present that much of a threat. It's not great for you. It can be bad. I have lost to it, but I didn't lose to it because of crew. I think that you can recover from this quite well with 17 pieces of ice. I think you'll be fine. Flex slot swaps another accoutrement. Like I said, I think it's important to adapt a deck and develop it, because this is a deck that I feel good about, but I think it can be even better. Let's talk about cards that might make it better. Seamless launch. So I originally intended this to be a seamless deck. It shouldn't surprise you to know that. I think this is completely fine to run. I think that if you run seamless, it's perfectly good. I ended up cutting these for Vovo, and I like Vovo way more. Entirely because I can install Vovo, and Vovo is saving me so much more money than Seamless ever did. But Seamless opens different play lines. It's better for Never Advance. Totally fine if you run this. I might suggest cutting something other than Vovo. We might look at slotting more Botus and getting rid of a Bran or something like that. But regardless of what that is, know that Seamless is a good call. It's perfectly reasonable. Hollow Man. This is the preferred Never Advance speed up tool. If we want to take this from a regular Never Advance deck to a really fast Never Advance deck, Hollow Man's the way to go. 3 influence is rough though. It would require an overhaul of the ice pool. That's really where I would want to make sacrifices. I would say that if this deck were to be optimized further, Hollow Man is the card I feel the strongest about including. I think that this card opens really powerful play lines, and we can afford to play it. Especially, again, Vovo subsidizing the initial res and all of that. It's very good. That said, and he can move. We love that too. However, it's going to be a considerable adjustment to the influence, and I wanted to make sure I got this out there in the state that it's been successful for me with. That said, like I said, I think that the end result of this, kind of optimized for high-level play, is going to involve Hollow Man in some regard. Saisentan and Mitra is technically a win condition. I've done it. It's extremely funny. It also just doesn't work on really strong players who have board awareness. Slot this if you're in a revolver meta or if there's a lot of criminals running around that are face-checking things, though. Saisentan is very nasty against a more reckless player base. That said, I think a lot of people are very conservative right now, or have a lot of ways to cheat past it. I'd rather have Anemone being a sure thing and being swappable with Mitra than I would have Saisentan most of the time. I went from 2 to 1 to none. I don't really regret it. You might cut Empiricist for 1. It's really up to you. The Hatfrin res text is better than Fly Swatters in most matchups. Even if you trash a card for it, this is a really great thing to be doing in the remote, especially if you want to defend an agenda. That said, that double subtype sucks. It's really bad. I don't like it at all. The fact of the matter is you basically don't have a way to guarantee that they can't deal with the other problems unless you have enough ETRs of different subtypes behind it that you can, well, guarantee it. I found the card to be a little bit awkward. That said, it's still fine. You'd be reasonable to include it. Anoetic is strong in faction defense, right? Anoetic is just really good. However, we never want to trash 2 cards. That feels awful. It's also a 1 to trash, so if they find it anywhere, it's automatically dead. And runners are unlikely to be able to run again after missing an Adrian Sai game anyway, so I would argue that Anoetic is just a little much. It's a little bit more than we need when we're trying to play a little bit more rushy and a little bit less Glacier. There is a version of this deck that probably does not run Hollow and runs even more taxing stuff that wants Anoetic. It is a red deck that plays Ice. I understand that. Let's talk about some cards that warrant testing, but I haven't spent either enough or any time with. I like Simulation Reset, potentially. I think it has some really neat applications that people haven't really explored yet. Tucana is a ton of power. It's a really good way to build board for relatively little. That said, influence is a concern. Mavirus, if you're dealing with Anarchs a lot, is absolutely worth considering. Chucking it into Archives alone does a lot for you. Drafter is surprisingly good. I don't think that people are likely to run into it and not be able to handle it these days, but that shouldn't stop you from trying it. Piranhas is one of the best code gates in the game. Humanoid Resources would be a lot of tempo. I think, again, this is kind of an influence problem, but you could certainly consider it. Wall-to-wall, interesting. I don't really necessarily buy it, but it was a suggestion that I was given at one point, and I do think it's pretty interesting. And the last one's a little spicy. It's Hyobu Precog Manifold. I think that card is a lot better than people think it is. I think no runner is ever going to want to pay to trash it, and I think that it opens a really obnoxious scoring window in a Never Advance deck that doesn't need to spend time at the beginning pre-advancing something. That card is the one out of this list I'm most excited by because I think that people are not prepared to have to play even more Psy games for the game. I think that's very, very good. You're also more likely to have more liquid cash around than they are, so that's good for you. Let's talk some general pilot strats and notes, right? You're going into a new deck, you probably haven't spent a ton of time with A Teia. If you have, some of this might be skippable, but I want to talk about how this is going to work anyway. We are installing into a remote any turn we're not triple advancing something. You will have a card to do so. You should do so. Build board all the time. There are cases where the installs will go on the centrals because they have to, but you should always be considering, how do I get things into the remotes and make use of that A Teia click. Ideally, you want something for the root and a piece of ice for your freebie. I can count on one hand the number of times I have paid for an ice install that wasn't on R&D. I don't do that. A Teia does that for you. That's the whole point. Use it, use it, use it. Odds are there is one central you're going to have to protect, probably R&D. Be careful not to overinvest in the remotes once you sufficiently scared the runner off of them. There is often a point in the game where the runner gives up on running a costly remote, especially with defensive upgrades, and just hammers centrals instead. Do not let them do this for cheap. R&D can potentially need to go 2 or 3 high by the mid-game. You have the ice to do it. Make it happen if you have to. Slide Vovo over if you have to. Do what you need to do to protect where the agendas are going to be, because they are not staying in HQ. If you suspect deep dive, hold your anemones and mitras and big barriers for centrals. I mentioned this prior, R&D is the big one. Just make it absolutely hellacious for them to touch that central. You can also slide Adrian over, and it's really obnoxious. A deep dive focused deck is probably not prepared to make a really good threat at the remote, and Adrian can protect you between scoring windows, or just in general. That's really your prerogative. It's pretty great, though. Don't get precious about your proprio counters, but ideally fire them when the runner's too poor to rerun. This is just a timing thing. You'll feel it out as you go. Do not forget to move your Sysops constantly. I really want to emphasize this. I think this effect is extremely strong, and I think that it's not utilized enough. Remember that you want to bait runs to tax the runner by forcing them to run servers that they don't need to be running, and changing the board state with that plus installs will constantly keep them guessing and keep them on their toes. You need to be making the runner do math constantly. I want to win by mental submission from too much calculus. Hurt them. Hurt the brain. Put the hard decisions on the other side of the table. Only pre-advanced agendas if you're totally confident they cannot get in, or if you're playing a version that has traps like, or things like idiosyncrasis, right? Like, you could run an Urtica, you could run idiosyncrasis. I don't think those are optimal choices, especially because if pre-advances have the potential to be traps, they're probably going to find a way to circumvent it or check it with pinhole, if, depending on what it is, and I'm just not really into that, but it's certainly a choice you could make. If you want to force the runner to run your remotes, you need to make both of them a credible threat. Score out of both of them, and make each install threatening. You could easily make a big dumb Glacier Tower with this, but you probably shouldn't. It is almost certainly more correct to just make 2 really annoying remotes than 1 ridiculous unassailable tower. That's not 100% true. There are specific matchups where, just due to sufficient cheating effects or what have you, going any kind of shallow, and I'm counting like 2 ice as shallow, 3 as reasonable, everything past that being, actually hard to get through, there's a point where runners will eventually just give up. You need to achieve that if you're going to go super duper tall, and going super duper tall is just hard. You're better off splitting their attentions most of the time, but there's cases where you're going to need to adjust your play, and you have the tools to do it, so make use. Remember to play with some urgency. This is a rushy, never advanced deck, not an unassailable Glacier, no matter how many people have told me that it feels like they're playing against Glacier. I want to use this to go very, very quickly. You want to be done in 3 scores that they did not know the location of nor the timing windows for. The goal is to constantly put the runner on the back foot and force them to make difficult, costly decisions. We are better at that than almost any deck in the format right now. We are more capable of hitting 7 points very reasonably than almost any other deck in the format right now. Use it. Play like it. Play with some amount of haste. Make smart choices, but make them quickly. In conclusion, Slot Bite, thanks for watching. The deck list is going to be in the description. Hopefully you get some use out of it. Let me know what you think.